When the body says, "I'm fine," but trauma still lives inside, we encounter one of the most profound disconnections in human experience. This invisible struggle affects millions of people who appear perfectly healthy on the surface, yet carry within them the cellular memory of experiences that continue to shape their daily lives in ways they might not even recognize. The work of renowned physician and trauma expert Gabor Maté has illuminated this hidden landscape where our bodies hold stories that our minds have forgotten or chosen to bury, creating a complex dance between what we consciously know about ourselves and what our physical being continues to remember. The human body possesses an extraordinary intelligence that extends far beyond our conscious awareness, functioning as a sophisticated recording system that documents every significant experience we've ever had. When we encounter situations that overwhelm our capacity to process them in the moment, our nervous system makes a survival decision to compartmentalize these experiences, storing them in our muscles, organs, and cellular structures rather than allowing them to be fully integrated into our conscious memory. This biological wisdom serves us well in acute situations, allowing us to function and survive when we might otherwise be completely overwhelmed by the intensity of what we're experiencing. However, this same protective mechanism that serves us so well in crisis can become a source of ongoing suffering when these stored experiences remain unprocessed and unintegrated. The body continues to respond to triggers and stimuli as if the original trauma is still happening, even when our rational mind insists that we've moved on and everything is fine. This creates a profound internal conflict where our conscious self believes one thing while our autonomic nervous system tells an entirely different story, leaving us feeling confused about why we react so strongly to seemingly minor events or why we feel anxious and unsettled for no apparent reason. The phrase "the body keeps the score," popularized by trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk, perfectly captures this phenomenon where our physical being maintains an accurate record of our experiences long after our minds have processed them or filed them away. Our bodies speak a different language than our thoughts, communicating through sensations, tensions, chronic pain, digestive issues, sleep disturbances, and countless other physical manifestations that seem unrelated to any current stressor or medical condition. These somatic expressions represent the body's attempt to communicate what cannot be spoken in words, to bring attention to wounds that remain unhealed despite our best efforts to move forward. Understanding this mind-body split requires us to recognize that trauma isn't necessarily defined by the dramatic events we typically associate with the word, but rather by our individual capacity to process and integrate challenging experiences at the time they occurred. What might be manageable for one person could be completely overwhelming for another, depending on factors like age, previous experiences, available support systems, and innate sensitivity levels. A child who experiences emotional neglect, for instance, might not consciously remember feeling unloved or unsafe, but their body may continue to respond to intimate relationships with fear and hypervigilance decades later. The disconnect between mind and body often begins in childhood when we learn to prioritize the needs and expectations of others over our own internal experience. Children are naturally skilled at reading the emotional climate around them and adapting their behavior to ensure their survival and maintain connection with their caregivers. If expressing certain emotions or needs results in rejection, punishment, or withdrawal of love, children quickly learn to suppress these parts of themselves, often to such a degree that they lose conscious awareness of what they're actually feeling or needing in any given moment. This adaptive strategy, while necessary for childhood survival, can create lasting patterns where we become experts at managing our external presentation while remaining disconnected from our internal reality. We learn to say, "I'm fine," not just to others but to ourselves, genuinely believing this to be true because we've become so skilled at ignoring or minimizing our body's signals. The tension in our shoulders, the knot in our stomach, the racing heart, the chronic fatigue, these become background noise rather than important information about our emotional and psychological state. Gabor Maté's work emphasizes that this mind-body disconnection isn't a personal failing or weakness, but rather a natural response to circumstances that required us to prioritize external compliance over internal awareness. The capacity to dissociate from our bodily experience is actually a sophisticated survival mechanism that allows us to function in situations that might otherwise be unbearable. However, what serves us in crisis can limit us in recovery, creating barriers to healing that persist long after the original threat has passed. The process of reconnecting with our body's wisdom requires tremendous patience and compassion, as we're essentially learning to trust and listen to signals we've spent years, or even decades learning to ignore. This reconnection often begins with simple awareness practices that help us tune into sensations, tensions, and rhythms that have been running in the background of our consciousness. Something as basic as taking 3 conscious breaths and noticing what we feel in our chest, stomach, or shoulders can begin to bridge the gap between mind and body. Many people discover that their body has been trying to communicate with them for years through various symptoms and sensations that they've dismissed as random or insignificant. Chronic headaches might be linked to unexpressed anger. Digestive issues could be connected to anxiety about safety and security, or persistent fatigue might reflect the exhaustion of constantly maintaining an external facade while suppressing internal truth. These physical manifestations aren't psychosomatic in the dismissive sense that many people understand the term, but rather represent the body's legitimate attempt to process and release what the mind has been unable to integrate. One of the most challenging aspects of this healing journey is learning to differentiate between thoughts and sensations, between what we think we should be feeling and what we actually are experiencing in our body. Our culture tends to privilege intellectual understanding over somatic awareness, leading us to believe that if we can understand something cognitively, we should be able to change it mentally. However, trauma healing requires engaging with the parts of ourselves that exist below the level of conscious thought, in the realm of sensation, emotion, and nervous system activation. The body's timeline for healing often moves much slower than our mind's timeline for recovery, which can create frustration and impatience when we feel like we should be over something that our body is still actively processing. Understanding that healing isn't linear and that setbacks aren't failures becomes crucial for maintaining the persistence and self-compassion necessary for long-term recovery. The body may need to revisit certain themes or sensations multiple times as it gradually releases layers of stored experience, much like how physical wounds may need to be cleaned and tended repeatedly before they fully heal. Have you ever noticed how your body responds to stress before your mind even recognizes what's happening? Perhaps your shoulders tense, your breathing becomes shallow, or your stomach tightens in certain situations, signaling that something important is occurring beneath the surface of your conscious awareness? These physical responses often contain valuable information about our deeper needs and boundaries, serving as an early warning system that can help us navigate challenging situations with greater wisdom and self-care. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who clicked on this video and is taking time out of their day to explore these important questions about healing and self-awareness. Your willingness to examine these deeper aspects of human experience contributes to a broader conversation about mental health and trauma recovery that benefits us all. If you're finding this exploration meaningful, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with the mind-body connection in the comments below, but only if you feel comfortable sharing. Learning to trust our body's signals requires unlearning many of the messages we received about ignoring pain, pushing through discomfort, and prioritizing productivity over self-care. In many families and cultures, physical symptoms are viewed as inconveniences to be managed rather than communications to be understood, leading us to develop a somewhat adversarial relationship with our own body. We learn to see physical sensations as obstacles to overcome rather than as valuable information that can guide us toward greater health and wholeness. The process of rebuilding trust with our body often begins with small experiments in listening and responding to physical signals. This might involve honoring the impulse to rest when we feel tired, eating when we're hungry rather than when the clock says it's time, or stepping away from conversations or environments that create tension or anxiety. These seemingly simple actions can feel revolutionary for people who have spent years or decades overriding their body's wisdom in favor of external expectations or internal shoulds and musts. One of the most profound insights from trauma research is understanding that the body doesn't lie or manipulate in the way that our thoughts sometimes do. While our minds can convince us that we're fine when we're struggling, that we don't need help when we're overwhelmed, or that we should be grateful when we're actually hurt or angry, our body provides a more honest assessment of our actual state. Learning to read these physical signals becomes like learning a new language, one that can provide crucial information about our needs, boundaries, and authentic responses to the world around us. The relationship between chronic illness and unprocessed trauma has become an area of increasing research and understanding, with many studies showing connections between adverse childhood experiences and later health problems, including autoimmune conditions, cardiovascular disease, and chronic pain syndromes. This doesn't mean that all illness is psychological in origin, but rather that the stress of carrying unprocessed experiences can create ongoing activation in our nervous system that over time can contribute to physical health challenges. Understanding this connection can be both liberating and overwhelming. Liberating because it suggests that healing psychological wounds might contribute to physical healing, and overwhelming because it can feel like we're responsible for our illness in ways that create additional shame and self-blame. The key is finding a balance between taking responsibility for our healing journey while recognizing that many factors contribute to both illness and recovery, most of which are beyond our conscious control. The practice of somatic awareness, paying attention to sensations, tensions, and physical responses, can become a pathway back to wholeness for people who have learned to live primarily in their heads. This isn't about becoming overly focused on every physical sensation, but rather about developing a friendly curiosity toward the information our body is constantly providing. Like learning to appreciate a piece of music that we previously only heard as background noise. Developing somatic awareness allows us to perceive layers of experience that were always present but previously ignored. Many people find that as they begin to listen more carefully to their body signals, they discover needs and preferences they weren't consciously aware of. They might realize that certain relationships consistently create tension in their chest, that specific environments make them feel either energized or drained, or that particular activities bring a sense of peace or agitation that extends beyond their mental assessment of whether these things are good or bad for them. This information becomes invaluable for making choices that support rather than undermine their overall well-being. The healing journey often involves learning to hold space for paradox and complexity rather than seeking simple answers or quick fixes. We might simultaneously feel grateful for our survival strategies while also recognizing their current limitations, appreciate our resilience while also acknowledging our wounds, or feel hopeful about healing while also grieving what we lost along the way. The body's wisdom includes the capacity to hold multiple truths at once, something our thinking mind often struggles to accept. And speaking of holding multiple truths, here's something that might seem completely unrelated but actually isn't. If this conversation is resonating with you and helping you think about your own healing journey in new ways, hitting that like button would be like giving your body permission to acknowledge that this information feels valuable to you. Sometimes the simple act of clicking like is actually our body's way of saying, yes, this matters to me, before our mind has fully caught up to what we're learning. The integration of mind and body awareness doesn't happen overnight, and it's not a destination we arrive at once and then maintain effortlessly forever. Instead, it's an ongoing practice of checking in, listening, adjusting, and responding with increasing sensitivity and wisdom. Some days we might feel deeply connected to our physical experience, while other days we might find ourselves caught up in mental loops that disconnect us from somatic awareness. Both experiences are normal parts of the healing process. The cultural shift toward greater understanding of trauma and its effects on both mental and physical health represents a profound evolution in how we think about healing and recovery. No longer do we need to choose between addressing psychological wounds or physical symptoms. We can recognize them as different expressions of the same underlying experiences that require integrated approaches to healing. This doesn't mean that every physical symptom has a psychological cause, but rather that healing often requires attention to both mental and physical aspects of our experience. For many people, the recognition that their body has been holding and expressing their deepest truths brings both relief and grief. Relief at finally understanding why they felt the way they have, and grief for the years they spent disconnected from this crucial source of information and wisdom. This grief is itself part of the healing process, representing a mourning for what was lost during the times when survival required disconnection from internal experience. The journey toward integration and wholeness is ultimately a journey toward authenticity, toward becoming who we actually are rather than who we think we should be or who others need us to be. Our body's wisdom has been patiently waiting for us to remember how to listen, offering guidance that can lead us toward choices, relationships, and ways of living that truly support our deepest well-being rather than just our external presentation of being fine. As we come to the end of our exploration today, I hope you're leaving with a deeper appreciation for the incredible intelligence of your own body and perhaps a renewed curiosity about what it might be trying to tell you. The path toward healing and integration isn't always easy, but it leads toward a kind of wholeness and authenticity that makes the journey worthwhile. Remember that healing happens in layers and waves, not in straight lines, and that every small step toward greater self-awareness contributes to your overall well-being in ways that extend far beyond what you might immediately recognize. If this conversation has sparked some insights or questions for you, I'd love for you to give this video a like and share your thoughts in the comments below if you feel moved to do so. Your engagement helps this content reach others who might be on similar journeys of discovery and healing. Feel free to check out the next video that's appearing on your screen if you're interested in continuing this exploration. And if you'd like to join our community of people committed to understanding the deeper aspects of mental health and healing, consider subscribing to the Not What It Seems channel. Take care of yourself, and remember, your body's wisdom is always available to you when you're ready to listen.